my absolute favorite character, and they show up in episode 2. I believe the character's name is Kamir, and they're played by an actor named Manny Jacinto. I love this guy. He's like a former like smuggler and criminal who just wants to kind of live this life of leisure, and he ends up helping the May and her assassinations, and he just has this kind of like lackadaisical attitude, and his dialogue, unlike some of the other Jedi characters who are just, I think, stoic to a point where it just doesn't work and it kind of comes off unintentionally funny sometimes. And we'll get to those characters because some of these characters aren't working in the show for me so far. But he actually feels like a real living, breathing person, you know, someone who is just trying to get by, but he's kind of sassy and sarcastic about it, but not to the point where he's a ridiculous, over-the-top character. But I just like how he carries himself and how he presents himself. Let's go ahead and move on to my review for Star Wars The Acolyte. At least the first 2 episodes. I know all them fancy pants critics have gotten 4 or 5 episodes already. I'm just a lowly schmuck, a lowly schlub, and I got to settle for the 2 episodes that are currently on Disney+. But I will share my impressions of them so far, and I'll watch the series, you know, up to a point, and perhaps in the next couple of weeks do a full season 1 review, if I so choose to continue to watch it. But we'll see. We'll see. Now, as I've said before on many streams and many reviews that have focused on Star Wars, you know, I've been a Star Wars fan for a very long time. I grew up watching the original trilogy many times over. I saw it in the theaters when they did the re-releases for A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi in the late 90s. That was my first exposure to Star Wars. My family took me to the theater to see those, and I was like, whoa! And that was before, you know, I even knew the concept of Han shot first, all that stuff. It was incredible. It was amazing. And I was a Star Wars fan ever since, and I remember going to Blockbuster and then renting them from Blockbuster before eventually buying them on, VHS. And, you know, like a lot of people, super excited for episode 1. It's like, what? He's going to be doing 3 new movies and everything. And, you know, of course, you know, ended up seeing Phantom Menace. Loved it as a little kid. But, of course, you know, received some mixed reviews. And it wasn't until episode 2, Attack the Clones, and that was when I was becoming more discerning, more critical, and I just remember watching this going like, this movie fucking sucks. This movie's just really boring. And I was like, wait a minute, and I went back and I watched Phantom Menace. I was like, oh no, and it was bad too, right? And I know you have so many people that are often saying like, this is the worst state that Star Wars has ever been in, but you know, you young kids out there, you don't remember when the prequels are coming out. A lot of people are saying that was the worst period for Star Wars. I think a lot of different people would say, you know, certain years, certain decades are the worst for Star Wars. But you know, it's something that we've heard time and time again. Now, I will agree. I do not think Star Wars is in a great state at the moment. That's not to say that every single thing has been terrible. Though there have been, I think, a lot of projects that have been good. There's been a couple that stand. I think the first couple seasons of The Mandalorian I really enjoyed. I think Andor is best. I think I would argue Andor is probably the best Star Wars perhaps since, you know, The Empire Strikes Back in terms of the storytelling and the writing and the character work in there. I think it expanded the world of Star Wars in a great way, showcased what it was like to, you know, just for the schmucks and the schlubs to live under fascism. I think that was pretty cool. But, you know, and Rogue One, I really enjoyed Rogue One. I thought it provided some great context, you know, following the team that found the Death Star plans, the original, not the Bothans. Everyone's like, oh, them Bothans. That was the second Death Star, you silly billies. And that was a good movie. And then, you know, but there's been a lot of stuff that I think has disappointed people, from the new sequel trilogy to a number of the TV shows like Ahsoka, Mando Season 3, Boba Fett. You know, Obi-Wan Kenobi. It's been rough. I think it's been rough to be a Star Wars fan, but you know, despite how bad it may have been in the past or it is right now, like I'm always going to have that original trilogy in those books and some of the things that I've been able to see over these last few years. Like there's still there has been some good stuff, you know. But in any case, you know, I bring all of this up since I do want to talk about the Acolyte, this newest 8-episode series from, you know, Lucasfilm. But for people who have been unaware of it, and have little information on it. Let me provide you with a bit of a synopsis. It is set 100 years before the events of the Phantom Menace during the High Republic era. And it follows a team of Jedi investigating a series of murders that bring them into contact with a former Jedi Padawan and a sinister conspiracy. And so I'll start off by saying, let's get to the positives. I'll start by saying the positives. I think it's interesting that this is one of the first big Star Wars projects, whether it be a movie or TV show, that is not entrenched in the prequel era or the original trilogy era or now like the sequel era or anything in between. Like I like the fact that this new era, which I guess has come about recently, it's not the Old Republic. It's not like based on Knights of the Old Republic, KOTOR and Revan and all that and Malak. This is a more recent creation. And I know they've been exploring it in books and comics and things, and at least that's possibly video. I know they're working on a video game. I believe Quantic Dream is working on a video game right now. But I'm relatively unfamiliar with this specific era. But at the same time, I think that's a good thing because at this point, it's like, all right, you're not basing this off of anything that we've like seen before in terms of characters or Skywalkers or Fets or Kenobis. It's like, hey, this could be a fresh start. And I think that's very smart. And I think so far, how it introduces us to this world, seeing the Jedi seemingly at the height of their power, seeing the state of the galaxy, living in a relatively peaceful time, I think that's a cool start. And so what I can definitely say is if you're unfamiliar with Star Wars in general, or your only connection to maybe the series is some of the movies like the original trilogy or perhaps the prequels or even the more recent ones, then I think this could be a cool entry point for you because it doesn't rely on anything from the past outside of the idea of what a Jedi is and the Force is and the Sith or the dark side. Those are like really only three things you need to know. And even then, it's not too overly complicated. It's a bunch of religious monks who have telekinetic and telepathic powers, right? So I think that's cool. And the other thing that really stood out to me is the production values. While I don't think they're always consistent, there is some inconsistencies in how certain things look. I do appreciate that so many of these actors are just not surrounded by the volume and the green screen. They're actually walking on real sets or they're shooting on location. They're not just staring at a pair of tennis balls and trying to have a conversation with it. Like I think that's good, and I think you see that in a number of the performances. So far it helps with a number of the performances, and so there are times when there's like some CGI that's used where it's like, okay, this doesn't feel like cinematic CGI that we may have seen in some of the Star Wars movies as of late. Like even though this show clearly has a significant budget. It doesn't look as good as we've seen before, which I feel like can be a little distracting. And then the other thing that I do like about the show, and this is something I had a lot of misgivings about, because originally I think the pitch for the series was we're going to follow the Sith. We're going to follow dark side users, right? And it's going to be their story. We're going to see the world, the Star Wars universe from their perspective. I think that's a great idea. That's a cool concept because I think so often in most Star Wars content, the majority of it, whether it be in movies or other shows or books or comics or what have you, it's mostly from the perspective of heroes. Maybe we'll get like a villainous, Darth Vader comic book series, or we follow more of an amoral figure like Boba Fett and like some short stories or some books and stuff. But for the most part, it's the heroes. And so I like that pitch. I was like, yeah, let's that sounds different. It's set in a whole new era. Let's go. That's not what this show really is, at least from what I've seen so far. Allegedly, they changed some stuff behind the scenes and they switched around where even though we kind of get like the perspective of a dark side user, or at least an acolyte, doing some nefarious things, most of it is from the perspective of the Jedi trying to investigate as to why this individual is going around and murdering these Jedi Masters. And I was kind of like, I don't know if I'm going to get invested in that. But I have to say, I am curious about the mystery so far. I'm wondering as to why this particular individual is doing these things, and maybe there's going to be some secrets revealed about the Jedi. Maybe they're not as good as they say they are, which I think is cool. But that's also been explored in some aspects of Star Wars before, where the Jedi they became arrogant, they became ignorant. They didn't perceive the threats that are obviously in front of them because of those two things, and they inevitably were destroyed. Or completely wiped out, almost wiped out. And so maybe we're kind of seeing the beginning of that. I think that's a cool story to tell. So I was like, okay, and they're building towards that right now with the types of characters that we're seeing, and that's when we get to the part of the show where I'm very mixed on. So far. Like, I'll have to admit, like, I'm not hating this show. I don't think this show is a dumpster fire like some critics have described it as being. There's a lot of people that love it. They're saying, like, oh, this is one of the best Star Wars shows of all time. I don't think it's up to par with Andor, which I think it felt very different. It felt like a series that, instead of on Disney Plus, it belonged on, like, HBO. Just the acting and the writing and the dialogue. It's not there. It isn't. But some of the characters are working for me so far. I'm unfamiliar with some of these people. Some of these people, I've seen them in other shows, but like this particular person, I feel like this is my first time seeing them in something. You have Amandla Stenberg, who's playing dual roles. She's playing dual roles. The first episode reveals that, she plays Osha. She is this former Padawan of this Jedi Master, and she left the Order, and she's doing her own thing. But then you have this other character, May, who is basically a Sith assassin and an acolyte. And it's a case of mistaken identity. And I think so far, at least what the actress has been given, has been quite solid. I think I honestly prefer the character. Which one of you is it again? Wait, which one is it? And thankfully they wear different clothes so you can tell them apart occasionally. But I really do enjoy the character of Osha. I like the idea of a Jedi that kind of like, you know what, fuck the Order. I'm done with this. This is just not working out. I want to carve my own path. I think already we're kind of like on the side of that type of character, from the start, because we've seen the Jedi before and how they've been portrayed to be very arrogant and ignorant, as I said. And someone go like, you know what, fuck your traditions and all that. Kind of similar to Ahsoka to a degree, except without all the baggage of it, without all that baggage. And so I like her character so far, and the mistaken identity, so you're kind of invested, in that. They do establish that there was a traumatic event that happened to both of these characters, and they have not yet explored that adequately. One of the things that this show does that I don't think works at all is that it does a lot of telling and not showing. There are so many scenes between characters where they're either just sitting around or talking to each other, and they're always describing things that we just haven't seen yet or they haven't shown. And I'm like, I just really don't like that type of storytelling. It's a little annoying, especially when you have like a nearly $200 million budget. You can't afford to do like a flashback in this case, unless they're saying, saving this for, later on in the show. But that's not a great start. And that's like right in the first like 2 episodes, they're doing a lot of exposition heavy dialogue, which is unnecessary, which I'm like, just show some of these scenes, these sequences that you're so often referring to, do it early instead of later. And then we kind of have a better perspective of why these characters are acting the way they are, especially when it comes to the characters of Osha and May. But at least right now, I like what that actress is doing playing these two characters. One of my favorite characters in the show so far is Master Soul, Jedi Master Soul, played by Lee Jun-jae. Now, it might be a name that you guys are unfamiliar with, but he previously appeared as the main lead in Squid Game, and he was awesome in that show. He did a great job. And he is the Jedi Master of Osha. That was his former Padawan. So he has this kind of connection to her character in these first 2 episodes. That's why he gets involved, because she's being blamed for her sister's crimes. He feels like he needs to be the one to investigate himself, but also bring her in and find out, why it's alleged that she's doing all these things. And his performance is kind of similar to Liam Neeson from Phantom Menace. Even he doesn't always go by the book. And I think that's cool. Even though it typically is like, yeah, I'll follow the orders of the council and the Jedi and all that. You know, he speaks his mind. You know, he likes to voice his opinion, and he's open to different perspectives. So again, I think that's a great character to introduce in Star Wars, someone who's not always going, you know, by the Jedi code. And so I'm liking him so far, and I like his chemistry with Amanda Stenberg. I think he's doing a great job. Now, as great as those two characters are, probably my absolute favorite character, and they show up in episode 2. I believe the character's name is Kamir, and they're played by an actor named Manny Jacinto. I love this guy. He's like a former like smuggler and criminal who just wants to kind of live this life of leisure, and he ends up helping the May and her assassinations. And he just has this kind of like lackadaisical attitude, and his dialogue, unlike some of the other Jedi characters who are just, I think, stoic to a point where it just doesn't work, and it kind of comes off unintentionally funny sometimes. And we'll get to those characters because some of these characters aren't working in the show for me so far. But he actually feels like a real living, breathing person, you know, someone who is just trying to get by, but he's kind of sassy and sarcastic about it, but not to the point where he's a ridiculous, over-the-top character. But I just like how he carries himself and how he presents himself. He's also a little odd and weird, and I definitely believe there is a lot more to him as a person. Like, one of the other big mysteries is, okay, who is this dark side user who is manipulating the Acolyte, you know, this entire time, sending around those missions? I wouldn't be surprised if it's him, but at least what they're doing so far of him, it's been really interesting and really cool. I just like him. He feels like he's the type of character you want to immediately go back to as soon as his scene's over. It's like, what about this guy? I want to see this guy interact with this person or that person. Like, he's the best character so far, I think, in the show, and I would want to see, you know, more with him. Now, but the rest of the cast, that's the problem. You know, they got a lot of different people coming in and out of this entire series so far. And even though I think the leads have been pretty solid, at least of what they've been given in their interactions has been pretty fun. I even like this one moment, too, between Lee Jun-jae and Amanda Stenberg, where he notices that the Osha, her character, has a tattoo. And he's like, what's that? Like a concerned dad when he sees the tattoo. And she explains, like, oh, let me tell you about it. I went out with the boys and the girls last night, because she's like this mechanic that does like this really dangerous job working for the Trade Federation. And she's going off about it, and he's just like, oh, good heavens. But at the same time, he's kind of like happy for her that she's finding herself. It's like, that's cool. I like that relationship. I really do. That's when other than when we're like hanging out with Manny Jacinto's character, when they're on screen, when they're having conversations, when it's not exposition heavy, and it's like, tell me about that thing that happened to you so we don't have to show it, you know, then it's pretty good. And so I like that. But God, some of these other, like, some recognizable actors, like Daphne Keane, she plays a Jedi Padawan in this. You have another actor named Charlie Barton who plays a Jedi Knight, recently a new Jedi Knight named Yord. And like so much of their stuff that they're given to do or say, it doesn't really add anything to their characters. It pretty much with them, it's like, okay, their line of dialogue is just going to get us to point A to point B to point C and then D. Like, none of them are like really standing out as characters. Like, they're not doing anything. Remember, and again, I understand this is just 2 episodes so far, but I'm not charmed by them. You know, they're not very interesting. And sometimes they're just kind of annoying. And I don't really blame the actors, because I'm familiar with Daphne Keane, of course. She, you know, famously played X-23. She played Laura in Logan. She did a great job, you know, in that role. But, you know, they just got her under some makeup, and they just got her saying some mumbo jumbo Star Wars dialogue, and it's like, let's do this thing in order to do that thing, and that's really the extent of her performance so far. And then there's like this other character played by actress Rebecca Henderson, who is just your, you know, by the book Jedi Master, just follow the rules, take your orders from the council, just do your thing. And again, not exactly interesting at all. And so I would say you probably have like a two strong lead actors who are doing a great job. And you have one interesting supporting character with a lot of mystery to them, which is cool. I want to see them more on screen. But then the rest of this cast so far, at least in these first two episodes, and like some of these guest actors, they're just not given much to do. And I hope they expand on them in future episodes. But if this is the extent that they're going to use them, just either for exposition or propelling like the plot forward, and not in an exactly compelling way, then yeah, that's frustrating. Now, yes, Carry-On Moss is in an episode of this series. All I'll say is, if you are excited to watch The Acolyte because of Carrie-Anne Moss, I would tell you right now to address your expectations very, very quickly. She is not in the show that much, and they move away from her character very quick. Now, the character might come back later on this season. I'm not sure, but she is absolutely not a focus in these first two episodes. She's in episode 1, but not for very long. But if you think this is going to be the Carrie-Anne Moss show, it's like, I'm going to be seeing Trinity doing some badass stuff, throughout these next two episodes. That's not what this is. And then we get to like kind of the last thing I wanted to comment on, which is, even though I've kind of talked about the aesthetic of the show and the CGI, it's the action sequences. And so this is a new approach in Star Wars. Now, of course, Star Wars, we've had the lightsaber battles and things. We got all sorts of like shootouts, of course. This show does a lot of wire work. Does a lot of wire work, a lot of hand-to-hand combat. It reminded me of a lot of like Hong Kong cinema. And if you're into that kind of thing, then I think maybe you might like this. It's a very different approach to combat and action sequences than we've seen in Star Wars previously. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of the choreography in a lot of Hong Kong cinema. Even stuff like, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, right? That's probably like some of the best of it. And I like that. It's not my go-to, but I like it, fair enough. But if you're not a fan of like a lot of wire work or stuff that feels overly choreographed to the point where it doesn't feel like natural anymore, that's what so much of the fighting it is in this. I feel like because it just feels so incredibly well practiced, it almost just doesn't feel like a natural fight. It's overproduced. It's like a dancing. That's a great way to describe it. It's almost like a dance. And I feel like Star Wars has kind of worked its way up to that point, where you had like the original trilogy, and I know, listen, the fight between Vader and Kenobi is incredibly dated. They barely knew what they were doing. David Prowse couldn't even see in the fucking helmet. You had Al Guinness was, too old to do that kind of thing, despite his fencing experience as a younger man. But I always preferred the fighting and the action, and especially the lightsaber combat, in The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. I really liked how they handled all it. It felt great. Plus, you just had the narrative weight of Vader fighting Luke and the context of this is a father fighting a son. All that was great. And I think I like the fight scene, obviously, in The Phantom Menace, even though it was much faster paced than any of the previous films. But once we got to like Attack the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, I feel like now the Jedi could literally do anything they wanted, where they're throwing their lightsabers around like they're goddamn batons. And it didn't feel grounded. It didn't feel like there was weight behind the combat or the swings and things. The punches, right? Didn't feel real. It felt overproduced. And I think the Star Wars has kind of been going that direction for years. For now, at this point, 20 years now. And it's always kind of taken me out of it. And I think this show does it too, where instead of just with lightsabers, it's more just with the kung fu fighting and stuff and the choreography. It doesn't really work for me. And I want to see, because there hasn't really been like a lightsaber battle yet. Lightsabers have come out and they've been used in combat, but you don't see any lightsabers clash, which is not necessary, but at least what they've shown so far, it hasn't really worked for me. It just something just that feels off about it. But yeah, so right at this point, no, I don't think this show is the worst thing ever. It's a dumpster fire. There are some interesting elements that have kept me invested. I do like the two leads of Amanda Stenberg and her and the two characters that she plays of Osha and May. And I think Loon Junjae's character of Soul is interesting, especially his relationship with Osha. I think that's cool. And I really want to see more of Manny Jacinto as Kamir. He's the standout so far in the show. He's just such a weird little character, and I'm sure more will be revealed along the way. But and I think at times it looks very good. It has a very nice aesthetic. They use their budget well for the most part. I like to look at the sets, but there's occasional times where it looks a little cheap. And not all the fight choreography is working. And yeah, the supporting cast, unless they do something amazing with them in the next 6 episodes, which hopefully they do, they give them more to do other than just deliver exposition, then okay, I think we have something that could potentially be pretty cool. But right now, I'm just kind of feeling mixed on this at the moment. So yeah, we'll see. I'm gonna keep watching it. I'm not gonna stop after these first 2 episodes. I'm gonna give it a few more weeks, but if it doesn't improve, I might eventually fall off and just review what I've seen so far. But what about you guys? What are your opinions on the Acolyte? At least the first 2 episodes. If you've actually maybe you're one of the lucky so-and-sos, one of the lucky schmucks and schlubs who have seen the 4 episodes have been given to critics. Let me know.
5 minutes later.
How's the score? They got the guy who scored all of Jordan Peele's movies to do the music. To be completely honest, the score, it hasn't been memorable. it really hasn't been memorable. There's not too many memorable, like, old. They don't use, and it doesn't necessarily, they don't have to use like the original like Star Wars score, but I think it probably would help if they included that. But yeah, right now it's just yeah, it didn't really, nothing really stood out to me. Haven't seen it, but I'll give it a try. This is Christopher Throbbing. I haven't seen the Acolyte yet, but your review has me interested. Yeah. It's hitting a lot of positives for me, so optimistic. I have Jedi fatigue. Going to wait for all the episodes to air before hopping in on this. If word of mouth is good, yeah. Yeah. Kipin says, so matinee. Yeah, well, I don't really do ratings anymore, for those of you who don't know. So, I like to have my viewers kind of take the full context of my reviews themselves, not just put it all like a single word or a term or like a rating. But yeah, that's what I'll say. Krabby, yeah, remind you of The Matrix, definitely. It kind of has a similar choreography to The Matrix. Yeah. Mitch Dipson, this is how I feel about the Obi-Wan Anakin battle. Me too. I think this looks a little bit better than those fight scenes, but not by much. Let's see. I like that sort of choreography, says Biggie Smith, so it gets a thumbs up from me. There you go. As long as it's not like the wire work of Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes, I don't have the issue. Hopefully, not that bad. After episode 1, they brought in a different person to work on all the lights, and it was the fights, you're saying. Gotcha. No problem. So my lightsaber stab wounds? No lightsaber stab wounds yet. Some people do get stabbed, I will say that, but not by a lightsaber. And as far as I know, they're dead. I think they're fucking dead. Like, that's the part of the mystery. Like, there's a particular Jedi that gets stabbed, and they're like, oh shit, and that's what they're investigating so far. So there's that. Yeah, and Skeleton Crew's supposed to come out, so we'll see. Fine is good. Not everything needs to be very true. I mean, it could be a situation where, maybe it starts off slow, but potentially it could get better later on. I hope that's the case. I really do. But I'm not ready to write this show off quite yet. But we'll see. All the alien characters do look good. Yes, yeah. The makeup and the animatronics and the masks and all that. That's been pretty good so far. Yeah, they haven't really had like. Well, I guess there are a number of like alien characters that are the Jedi, but then like all the background ones have been pretty cool. Like there's this one bartender who's like really imposing and stuff, although not like physically threatening or anything like that. But he looks like really cool how he's moving around the environment and how he's talking. That worked for me. Fellboy, they don't have a good track record, but I'm willing to give it a shot. Yeah. I listen. I know going into this show, I was very trepidatious, and there's some things have disappointed me so far, but some stuff has worked. It's not. I would not describe this as a complete failure, as some people might be doing so online. We'll see. Racial Trade Federation guys are bad. They are. Yes, they are. They do not have the stereotypical, like, Asian accent. They're not doing that. They went out of their way to, they kind of sound like this. Kind of gave them like a nerdy white guy voice. Yeah. a male and female one. Our first female Nemodian. And she was very, very nervous. Yeah, they kind of give him like nerdy white guy. That's how I would describe it, nerdy white guy voice. Yeah, it's that when anytime you like ask a person like, what does a white person sound like? They're like that. Because like I'm just waiting. I'm very, very excited for Andor season 2. Can't wait. So they all sound like me. That's what I'm saying. They all sound like me, and that's why they're my favorite fucking characters in the show. Oh, you know what? Biggie Smith, you bring up a good point. They do introduce a new droid character whose name escapes me, but he's like they're like a little toolbox. Yeah, like a toolbox where they don't even move around. Actually, it's almost like I hate to describe it as like a smartphone. They're not like a smart. It's like this multi-person. It's like a Swiss Army knife. It's like this very rectangular Swiss Army knife. It has like a little voice. You can talk with it and stuff. And like our main character of Osha, she Osha, not May or whichever that character. She kind of always keeps it on her belt. And she's like able to take it apart, and like it has like a little like flame jet. She's able to like cauterize certain things or connect stuff or like sure. It was interesting. I was like, oh, this is kind of neat. For like a little droid, and because she's like an engineer when she left the Jedi Order. So yeah, that thing, Pip, that's his name. Pip, that's a cute little name too. Pip droid. Yeah, Aunt May's here. Oh my god, I wish Peter. Tamagotchi. Wow, that's another. Yeah. It's like if you combined a toolkit with a Tamagotchi. Great way to describe our little Pip droid. Very cute. Ocean Nutmeg, Christopher, whatever her name is. Ocean Nutmeg, Aunt May, whatever. But yeah, so far, I'm going to give it a shot. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it has some interesting ideas, and I do hope it gets better. We'll see. I'll let you guys know.